Catholic energies in expeditions to the east. The Pope benefited from the response to the crusade, while the image of Philip I, King of France, suffered immensely. Only at a later date would the papacy and the French crown again be united. He was as sacred as the members of the clergy. His anointment made it possible for him to share the image of a priest. But the dark pages kings wrote shadowed their exalted majesty. Medieval France had them all. Some kings led their lives emulating Jesus. Some fought on the front lines. Others simply enjoyed the throne. The reign of Philip I and Louis VI were two important periods that established kingship as a corporation. One of the longest reigns in French history was that of Philip I, who was king from 1060 to 1108. Over this period of time, the internal organization of the king's palace became clear. His royal household was made up of the chancellor, a cleric responsible for royal ceremonies and all written documents; the steward, a knight, organized banquets and cut the sovereign's meat when he ate in public; the butler, in charge of the royal cellar, personified the importance of wine; the chamberlain, he was in charge of the king's chamber and its contents safekeeping, royal treasures, jewels. King Philip I was 8 years old when his father died and had already been crowned 2 years before. He was an obstacle to the reform of the church, and under his reign, royal power retreated into a purely domestic nature. The contraction of the royal entourage increased the king's income, and so did profits from growing pasture lands, vineyards, and a changing agricultural practice. The contributions for the construction of churches were enormous. At Notre Dame, Louis VII is shown holding a model of the church he helped build with his gifts. Also, the clergy were responsible for creating the administrative pillars of the state. Their education and knowledge of a budgetary system could provide the king with a service he could not deny. The reign of Louis VI, called Louis the Fat, marked the reintegration of the Cluniac order within the framework of royalty. He offered his sword to the monastery and wrote to the new pope, Calixtus II, who launched the Second Crusade, calling himself special son of the Church of Rome. In Saint-Denis, the bodies of most of the kings of the Franks were kept. The saint was the protector of the Frankish kingdom, and Saint-Denis revived the spiritual values of the kings. Legends about the saint showed he was one of Peter's first disciples, and the kings of France offered their heart and soul to the Cathedral of Saint-Denis. For this reason, the restoration of the Abbey Church by Suger, its abbot, has a place in the political history of France. The kings considered their contributions to the church and cathedral building to be signs of their devotion to God. Suger decided the new church building should be essentially Carolingian. Light was everywhere, and all beings were united in it. Here in the Abbey of Saint-Denis, the Gothic style known as Opus Francigenum, meaning work in the French style, was first developed under the supervision of the abbot Suger. The first element, height, was attributed to St. John the disciple, and his conviction that God was light. And so cathedrals were given light, and as if reaching the heavens, taller designs. For the secular society who considered itself to be as one with the church, the design meant that they too could share a quest for eternity. Then there was incarnation, God as a man. The idea was brought to life by the images sculpted at the entrance of cathedrals, which were built to disseminate holy teachings. The style born in Saint-Denis spread quickly after the year 1140. Léon, Notre Dame, and Chartres were the first to follow the movement that was later adopted as the architectural prototype, reflecting the true presence of God in cathedrals. Gothic art would live forever. In music, the church in Paris played a key role in medieval France. Many medieval musical instruments fell into oblivion, with one very large exception: the organ. It was called the positive, and like other versions, it relied on air supplied by bellows, worked by either hands or feet. Even this instrument had a place in the feudal system. It was known as the king of instruments, a term derived from both its sound and its place in worship. The organ was at the center of the musical composition evolution that began in Paris, especially in the school of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which marked the beginning of its domination of musical style and technique. In this respect, Saint-Denis was a pioneer, contributing immensely to the development of the legal system. When Suger became abbot, formal agreements began to replace oral understandings. In 1112, the lords agreed to substitute a fixed rent, like a tax, for the income they had previously received from various sources. With the new contract, every citizen was responsible for paying his own taxes. When a bishop tried to abolish the agreement, he was killed by rioters. Meanwhile, the lord's power increased with the written contracts. A count defending himself from accusations said to his vassals, "I challenge you to a judicial duel, for I have acted within my rights. Everything that I have done in the country has been guided by justice and reason." That word, reason, distinctively revealed the changes on which social understandings were based. In another instance, the people from Flanders sent a written message to King Louis VI of France saying, "The election and installation of the Counts of Flanders has nothing to do with the King of France. The citizens of Flanders have the right to nominate the individual most closely related and the right to raise him to the office of Count." Also, the reformers of the Church had invented the framework of canon law. As secular justice developed, lawsuits were conducted in the sequence of supplication, inquiry, and appeal, and all documents produced were authenticated by a seal. Reason took hold. The land was never the same. The rate of progress made during the decades between 1180 and 1220 changed the face of France. It was agriculture that created a growing economy. There is little evidence of how agriculture developed before the end of the 11th century. However, it has been established that the discovery of more sophisticated tools used during the 12th century and beyond marked the beginning of the agricultural revolution and sparked a new century of progress. Bread was the staple of the land, the product of hard-working people who, until the invention of mills in the closing years of the 12th century, crushed the flour by hand. Here in Bézac-les-de-Toulouse, in southern France, flour mills became widely used. An increase in production had many effects. First, it saved families from starvation and secured their well-being. It provided an atmosphere that was conducive to having larger families. The considerable growth in population led to an economic growth, which translated into better defense for the people. Thus, power was still in the hands of the lords and the military class. The word knight comes from the Latin miles, meaning simply horseback rider. But being a knight meant more than that. Warriors were free men, men of distinguished families, rich. According to the Carolingian capitularies, warriors had to have more than a club to be allowed to fight. Mont Saint-Michel was a romantic background for knights, but also a preferred site for the sporty yet deadly tournaments known as jousts. The knights from Ile-de-France built an impeccable reputation in tournaments. Warriors from different parts of the kingdom agreed they were superior. The Knights Hospitaller of St. John, an order that developed in the latter half of the 12th century, had many Grand Masters of Frankish origin. They were wise and brave. Today, the official name of the order is the Sovereign Military and Hospitaller Order of St. John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes, and of Malta. Its relationship with France was unique. French nobility and the order fought hand in hand for the peace of God up until their final separation at the beginning of the 19th century, after the French Revolution. In present day, St. John is the oldest order of chivalry, and its historical treasures are kept on the island of Malta in the Mediterranean Sea. Knighthood was simply a nobility issue, a hereditary condition. When a knight's signature became equal in value to his oath,